Good afternoon. Welcome to the daily briefing at the EMA office, where I'm joined by Chairman Mark Kern and Sam Bierman from the Health Department. Before we get started, I want to welcome, we've been building Team St. Clair, a phrase that was coined several months ago, and we got a lot of followers out there. We want to welcome one of our loyal followers, Emily Speaks, who watches us every day. So we appreciate that, Emily, and please share the word, because Team St. Clair is going to put this invisible enemy to rest down the road here. Sam, you got some numbers today.
I do. So as of today, 40,214 St. Clair County residents have been tested, which is an increase of 1,555 from yesterday. We are at 4,134 positive test results, which is an increase of 60 from yesterday. And that does include both males and females from under the age of 10 up to their 80s. Our daily county positivity rate today is 3.9%, and we are at 36,080 negative test results. We are reporting no new additional deaths today, so we are still currently at 155. And for those who have completed their required IDPH 14-day quarantine, we are at 3,055. For state totals, 2,896,063 have been tested, with 186,471 positive test results, which is an increase of 1,759 from yesterday. And for deaths, the state is reporting 7,573, which is an increase of 30 from yesterday. For hospitalization numbers, and these are for hospitals that are in St. Clair County, currently we have 50 patients that are admitted due to COVID-related reasons, and 2 of those patients are on ventilators. For congregate living facilities that are in outbreak status, and that is 2 or more staff or residents that are either COVID positive or who have COVID-like symptoms, we only have 2 changes today in our facilities. The first one, Caseyville Nursing and Rehab. They are currently at 10 cases and no deaths, so that's an increase of 2 cases from yesterday. And TDL Incorporated in Belleville, they have 8 cases and no deaths, which is an increase of 4 cases from yesterday. And now I will turn it over to Chairman Kern for his update.
Thanks, Sam. So looks like we're about 15% of the county's been tested. And we listened to the governor's briefing earlier, and he noted that the big age group that is, they're really seeing a difference in the people that are now becoming a big part of our positives are the people 29 to 20 to 29 years old.
Yeah, the age group that we've been talking about for about the last week, significantly higher in our positivity rates.
So the word needs to get out. And today, again, under 40s, that's about half of the people we're talking about.
Exactly. And every day this week, we've had an increase of the number of residents of St. Clair County that we've tested, so we're always happy to see that. We want to test as many people as we can.
Unfortunately, the state added a lot to these tests.
They did.
And this week they're not here.
Correct.
So we're hoping that the state feels the urge to come back to St. Clair County and give us more testing days.
We would absolutely welcome them back for any other remote testing sites that they would like to host.
We need them to be part of Team St. Clair.
Absolutely.
Okay, we'll move into the zip code report. At this time, remember, these are the COVID positive diagnoses in these particular zip codes in St. Clair County. So we'll start with 62059. We remain the same today at 10. 62201 goes up 3 to 190. 62203 remains the same at 153. 62204 remains the same at 116. 62205 remains the same at 152. 62206 goes up by 5 today to 350. 62207 goes up by 1 to 202. 62208 goes up by 2 to 263. 62220 goes up by 2 today to 337. 62221 goes up by 5 to 366. 62223 goes up by 4 to 185. 62225 remains the same at 17. 62226 goes up by 4 to 420. 62232 goes up by 3 to 89. 62239 stays the same at 48. 62240 stays the same at 15. 62243 remains the same at 27. 62254 goes up by 2 to 127. 62255 stays the same at 13. 62257 stays the same at 22. 62258 goes up by 2 to 66. 62260 goes up by 2 to 55. 62264 remains the same at 68. 62269 goes up by 8 to 294. And 62285 goes up by 1 today to 38. So we've been talking to schools and talking about schools, and there's been a lot of change as the numbers change. Now our positivity rate today was 3.9%. That's looking pretty good. The regional positivity is getting a little better. So all these numbers are working in our favor, but we've got school administrators who have to make decisions for the fall, and school's starting pretty soon. So we're lucky today. We've got Carrie Ruby, the superintendent of O'Fallon School District 90, who had a school board meeting last night. And so Carrie's got some hot off the press news for us.
We do. Thank you, Chairman Kurt. I appreciate being here with all of you. I think, you've been keeping us up to date, and we really appreciate that. And your work has been so important to our community and to Team St. Clair, and we are proud to be part of that. It's tough to hear the numbers every day, but we sure appreciate that you bring us that and kind of help us make those decisions and help us decide what's best for our communities.
Well, we appreciate you, and I mean, you have to make a decision now for at least the next quarter of school, so that can be difficult. So we appreciate the situation you're in. So the board met last night, and what was the decision?
They did. So earlier, District 90 is the elementary school district and one of the elementary school districts in O'Fallon. And earlier in July, we surveyed families, we surveyed staff, and we said, what are you looking for in a return to learn plan? And so we heard a lot about social distancing, hand sanitizing, how are we going to do temperature checks? We had a lot of questions from families early July. Beyond that, then we built a plan. We came to our board and said on July 21st, we offered them a plan based on, at the time, we had about less than 10% of our staff and our students saying that they wanted a full remote option. And so we built that plan based around what we thought we could accommodate. So the fact that District 90 has 7 buildings, and when we had a few hundred students, we thought that would make sense for us to be able to accommodate those less than 10% of students and staff that needed a remote plan. So we put together a plan with our board and said 5 hours a day for 5 days a week. We really want students to be in the classroom, and then we'll meet the needs of our remote learners based on our staff that need to be in a remote setting. And so we did that. We came to the board on July 21st and we said, this is our plan, and the board approved it. And so after that, then we issued another survey or a questionnaire to our parents and said, okay, now we need to know names of students that are going to be remote or names of students that are going to be in person. And overwhelmingly, that changed. It changed to the tune of, close to 32%, and it's actually kind of changing every day because more families are saying that's what I need too in terms of a remote option. So we got closer to a 1,200 number in terms of the students that need a remote plan, and our numbers on our staff side increased too. So knowing that there's a potential that we would have a need for even more students to be in a remote setting and or more staff members, it became very difficult for us as District 90 to pull students out and pull teachers out and not see class sizes get very large in our in-person. So logistics came into play with that, as well as county numbers, looking at what's happening in our county, and we have to almost guess, what's going to happen in the future, and that's very difficult to do with this pandemic. Every day has been very different from the next. And so it's been difficult for us to make those projections, but we felt like it was important that we made a decision right away. So last night our board did meet virtually, and they said, looking at these numbers and the way that we showed them what our class sizes would be, as well as we had an issue with the fact that a lot of our students would be in a combined remote section, which means from multiple elementary schools, you might have 5 4th graders at this school, 5 at this school, and 5 at this, that combine together to make a remote section with a teacher that we would plug into that group. The hard part about that is when we return. What happens to those students? Do we put them back in their schools? How can we? And what is that teacher? So we showed all of that data to our families and to our board last night, and we had a lot of tough conversations about what's the best for our students, knowing that we also would have to transfer students, the in-person students, then would also have to be transferred to different elementary schools, not their home school, based on trying to balance out class sizes for health reasons. So being able to do all of that became the logistics of it became very difficult for us to get a nice size of a classroom and make sure students weren't as mixed as we possibly could. So those decisions were really tough ones, and those are decisions that are tough for all school districts, because we want nothing more than our kids to be in person, meeting together, one-on-one, working with their teachers, and our teachers want that too. But when it comes to safety and health, what is the best for our students and staff? And we were really struggling with that, but our board did say go ahead and approve a remote plan just for the first 9 weeks. We know we're going to revisit that as well when we get closer to that, because we're going to be looking at your numbers. We are watching every day. Our community members are watching, and we're watching to make sure the leaders are watching to see what the numbers are, so that we can look at the end of those 9 weeks. Is it smart to now start to trickle students back into the program in small groups? So be able to have them come back to a safe environment. So it's important that you're giving us this information every day, and we are watching it. It's important that IDPH is doing the great work that they are to help us understand what those positivity rates look like in the county and in the region.
So, wow, so August, today's the 5th. When does school start?
We start the 19th.
So you've got 2 weeks then to get your technology, or at least
Right.
re-up the technology you used in the spring.
Right.
How's that working out?
Our technology team is a small team, but they're a mighty team, and they're doing a great job of making sure we have devices available. We did loan out devices to students that needed it in the spring on that questionnaire that I mentioned, where families were saying, their name and if they needed a device. Many of them told us if they needed one or not, and or if they needed a hotspot. And so we are starting to compile that information, and now we'll compile it with more families if they say, I need a device now that we're going to go full remote. And so we're ordering more. We have been ordering more over the summer in anticipation of the possibility, and so we'll make sure that we connect those families that need it to online remote opportunities. And our teachers are working really hard. We have set up additional professional development for them online, to make sure that they feel very comfortable in that environment. And we have been having, we've had lots of professional development for them from the spring forward on remote options and those, Google Classroom and Zoom, and how to make the most of Flipgrid and all of those things that are important for teachers to use right now, because they're different tools than we've used in the past, and they're different tools that are necessary for us to connect to kids in a very safe way.
So will most of the faculty still be coming to school?
We will have, primarily, you'll see our buildings will still be alive. They'll still have people coming and going as needed. Some of our families will be coming in based on their student's IEP, individual IEP. If there is a service, that they're a related service that needs to happen in person. So we'll increase our PPE for our staff that are working with the students one-on-one, and having them come in small groups. One of the other goals that we have is to make sure that we see students right away to build that rapport, because that's one of the things that our teachers said, I really want to get to know my students because they're new this year to me in my classroom. And so we know that we have to pass out math workbooks, we have to pass out Chromebooks, we have to help start to build that relationship. So we're going to look at there'll be more like conferences, small group conferences with students to build that connection, hand them the materials out, provide the face masks that have been provided by the department, which we really appreciate, and the hand sanitizers, and giving them the materials that they need, and making sure everybody is safe and still able to connect to their instruction.
So special needs students, they'll be accommodated?
They will. And so those are very individual questions, for their IEP team, with the parents in that team. And so the process, the hard part about that is it takes a conversation, it takes putting it to paper and making sure that we have an amendment to that IEP and that is in place. But our staff has already started that conversation with families to be able to, look at what is appropriate for that learner, and is it appropriate for the child to connect remotely, which is the safest option, but is there something that's needed in person as well? And so we'll make those decisions individually.
So how will orientation look this year? It's probably easy for a child that was there last year, maybe not, since last
Right.
year was impacted too. This year, what can parents expect?
So we're trying to do as much as we can virtually. Again, we know that that's the best situation for a family. That's the safest. In fact, I had a new teacher orientation with my new teachers to District 90, and we said welcome to them, but it was via Zoom, which is, again, it's not quite as personal, and we would rather be in a personal space together. But knowing that it was important to meet via Zoom, we did that. And the same thing will happen for our orientation for our families. Principals will show some videos of, welcome, here's your school, because we have some new families as well as families that have changed schools based on the elevation of a grade level. So that as much as we can possibly do virtually, we're going to, because we know that that's the safest way to connect right now and make sure the students and staff are safe.
So the meal program, I assume that you had some shortened hours. Now, what are the hours of classes and how do meals play into that?
So we'll still use our 5 hours a day of instruction with the teacher. Some of it will be synchronous, some will be asynchronous, and additional work with the students. But beyond that, then we also will we will run some meals. Many of our meals will be delivered at a pickup location where families can come pick up lunches, but we're working on the logistics of that right now with our food service company and making sure that we can get the meals out to families like we did in the spring.
So the transportation assets that you have maybe will be delivering meals to homes?
That's exactly what happened in the spring. And so we're looking at how does that logistic work this year and how many families might need meals. And so trying to put all that puzzle together. But that's exactly what we did in the spring, where we said, we're not using our buses to transport kids or our bus service company to transport students. Instead, we'll use it to deliver meals. And that worked pretty well with them.
So I know last night at the board meeting, after the decision was made to go remote, then there were questions about the extracurricular activities. What have you decided about, or what has the state maybe decided for you about sports and band, those types of things?
And a lot of that has been changing. And we all know as educators, as leaders of districts, that so much is changing. Every day, every hour, we're getting new guidance or changed guidance. And we know that those that are making those decisions, those very difficult decisions, are doing so in the best interest of our students and staff too. And so we're constantly listening to what is the new IHSA plan, what is, the new, we're in SIJ HSAA, what is their plan for our association, and kind of listening to that guidance. What we know is that some of our clubs can be remote. So we have NJHS, for example, or student council, and still allowing students to be remotely connected in those types of yearbook, perhaps, or Scholar Bowl. There are some of our clubs that can meet remotely, and it makes good sense for our kids to meet remotely with them. Our board had a conversation about sports, and unfortunately, the hard part was they needed to make a pretty quick decision because we had tryouts ready to go, and we certainly don't want a student to try out for a sport only for us to say we can't offer it now. And so they had that conversation and said that they were most comfortable with us not having fall sports because they were concerned about can we kind of make sure that students don't mix together without masks on in a group that's close together, or how can we make sure that we accommodate that? And our board did struggle with the fact that we're saying we can't go to in person because that's not safe. How could we offer a sporting activity? And so that's a very tough conversation. But so far it's only for our fall sports, which I say only. My own children are involved in those, and so that's difficult. I know it really impacts families, and so that's a tough conversation to have. But they were looking at what's the best and the safest for our students and our staff.
So do you have any recommendations for parents, the setup in the home, how to, the best environment for learning? And then what about if a child is uncomfortable with learning remotely? Are there ways that they can be tutored or that the parents can maybe get extra materials to help?
Right, that's an excellent question. And I think as parents, we're looking at our parents as our partners in this. And we did last spring too. And I think that was really effective because we said, we're partners in this together. You're at home with your child, but we're going to be offering the instruction. And we know this semester this quarter will look very different from what it did in the spring. Well, last spring we didn't have attendance, we didn't have grades, we didn't have as much of the synchronous learning that we will have. A lot of that, not as much new material that was given to students, and that was based on the guidance from ISB, and so that guidance has all changed. So we know remote instruction will look different this this fall even than it did in the spring. So I think the key is for families to communicate with their individual teacher and or their if there's an aide assigned to the student and or their principal to say, here's what we're struggling with. And we have resources that we can help people, make sure that perhaps there's a schedule set up. So we had parents, reach out and say, I'm trying to figure out a schedule. And so I feel like the best advice for parents is to find a schedule and be really strict with it at first. Make sure there's a wake up time in the morning and that we're kind of getting ready for school in those new ways, eating breakfast together or setting up a place in the house that can be somewhat quiet, that can be away. Headphones maybe, because if you have multiple students like I do on at the same time, making sure that they have headphones so that they can connect. And really communication with the school is going to be key. And that individual teacher, as they start to set up their lesson plans and as teachers start to get their class lists and start to communicate with families, that's going to be so important that we have that communication back and forth between families and teachers.
So the connection will be there with the parents if they'll be able to tell if their child is online that they're really keeping up with assignments.
So that's the nice part about Google Classroom too. And actually I had a parent today, I've had some very good emails saying, we know this is a tough decision. Like this isn't a good decision. There are no good decisions right now. This is a really tough decision and we support and we appreciate the leadership. And I appreciate that. And I also have had some constructive feedback about, one parent said, how about set up a parent university? And I thought that's a fabulous idea. What a great idea to say, here's how you check whether or not your child is engaging on Google Classroom, because there are easy ways to do that, but not every parent knows that because they don't have to do that all the time. And so that's a very good idea. I really like that, to say here's our parent university and here's a video that shows you how to check in and make sure that your child is engaged. The other thing that I think is different, because it's different in the fall, that is helpful for parents is that we are taking attendance. And so if a teacher doesn't hear from a child for a few days, it is one where we'll go through our process of, reaching out to the family and saying, we haven't heard from you. And now it's becoming a truancy concern in terms of how come your child hasn't been getting on our calls, or is there something that we need? And that happens through a truancy process where we say, do we need to help find an alarm clock? Or do we need to help make sure that there's a system in place for that child? And we work together with families to set up whatever it is. And we'll do that as well. It will look very different than it usually does, because usually we see a student and can say he or she is late or he or she is not connecting. It'll be difficult, more difficult this year, because we might say, we didn't see you on the Zoom call today, and the family might say, well, that's because our computer was down. Okay, can we help with anything? Or, we'll see you tomorrow, and here's the new link for tomorrow's lesson. So it will be different, but much the same in that we are a partner together with families.
And is the Google Classroom interactive? So it's my understanding that a student could maybe be focusing on a Game Boy and looking at this, finding a way to have it look like they were actually paying attention. Can the teacher actually call out Johnny and say, hey, what's the answer to question number 2? Right.
A lot of our synchronous environment does exactly that, where the teacher can jump in and either via a text and the font and typing it into a message for a student to say, hey, let's see how this works, or on a Zoom call perhaps they may say, I need to see your camera on and I'd like to see your smile today, and those types of things. So I think there are lots of tricks and tools, and our educators are so much even better than I am at it, because I haven't been teaching for a while. That they've got quite a few tools at their disposal to engage kids in a remote setting. Is it the same? No. And that's the part that I think is heartbreaking for us, for our teachers, that it's not quite the same as seeing those aha moments and having a smile, exchanging a high five when something goes well in a classroom. That's the hard part for us, is that we can't do all of that. But we weren't going to be able to anyway, because we have masks and social distance, and we have desk shields, for example, that we had purchased to keep kids separate from one another. And so we knew that it was going to be different this year anyway. And that's what's a struggle with all of this, is it's different.
It's definitely different. Any anticipation as to when you'll know about a second quarter decision?
So right now, that's what we're defining. And so we're looking at our area school districts to see what kinds of ideas they have. we'll be looking at numbers, COVID positivity rates. We'll be looking at, is there something different that's happening in terms of the region or the county? Is it looking better? And or are families starting to feel comfortable coming back? And can we start to bring students back in small groups? Can we keep some students working remotely that feel more comfortable in that environment, their family feels comfortable there, but start bringing students in smaller groups to have those one-on-ones or more support to a student that might be struggling at that point?
Great. That sounds like a plan. Herb?
Sounds like a great plan.
Thank you.
I appreciate you coming in today. But one question, is there any of your staff members that you know was looking forward to doing this? It was really saying, hey, I want to be in a pandemic and I got to make these decisions.
Right, absolutely not. Did we ever foresee this? Did we ever want this? Absolutely not. It's just truly heartbreaking.
And the reason why I ask that question, I see comments that people are followers wanting to blame the school districts or wanting to blame the school teachers. And as I tell them for this last week and a half, the last thing the superintendents, the administrators, the staff wants to do is to do this.
Right.
But you're doing a balancing act here. You're doing what's best for the students and for the staff members. And I think that's what a lot of them are not thinking about is not only are you having to worry about the students, you have to worry about your staff.
Right.
So I applaud all of the districts who's having a rough time to come up with these plans. There was one question, a young lady said that she was confused. Will the teachers be teaching from the classroom or from home?
So that, and that's something that we're asking our educators to be professional, because there are times when it makes sense for them to educate or record from home. And what I mean by that is we will have some, hopefully not, but we may have some staff that are in a quarantine situation or have a medical condition that cannot come in person or should not be there in person. And or there may be an opportunity where the staff member might record a science experiment outside, or have different. So we're trying to use the available space, and knowing that as much as we can, we're going to try to social distance and keep people apart from one another, because that's exactly what we need to do. And so we're working with our staff to say there are times that you might be outdoors, for example, recording something, or have an opportunity to record a lesson from home, for example. And so we're working with staff to kind of make that make sense based on their needs, based on our needs, and making sure that families get the best instruction we can.
Good. And answer that, Brian. Do you have any other ones?
Yeah, there's a few other ones that came in. One person asked, is there any consideration or any plan for, let's say, a child whose parents work and they might have to go to some type of daycare setting and wouldn't be able to attend the regular school day, but obviously still need to meet the learning?
Absolutely. And it's an excellent idea, an excellent question. And those are the types of really constructive feedback that we're getting, because this is all new to all of us as we go into this environment. And so we're going to continue to encourage our teachers that, while there is a recommendation for synchronous learning because of engagement and the need to engage, that we may need to record lessons, for example, that are given synchronously, but go ahead and record that lesson so that a family that perhaps maybe mom and dad were working all day and the older brother or sister was watching and maybe didn't help or maybe couldn't get them online, to make sure that that's available for kids. And so we're working with our staff to see if is there a way that we can make that work for families, because we know that some will go to a daycare setting or need to have a high school student help them at home, and maybe it's better for that family to do some of the work. Definitely can happen on the asynchronous learning. That can always happen after hours in the evening and later. But the synchronous piece is what we're going to need to continue to work with our staff on, trying to be as flexible as possible. From the very beginning, we've said to our staff and our parents, we need you to be flexible. We need you to move forward with grace and compassion for one another, because this is truly a challenging situation and none of us want to be in it. And so those things, if we're flexible and if we're compassionate with one another and we're using grace as we move forward as much as possible, and being flexible is so important for families, because families have a lot on their plates right now too.
Exactly. What else you got, Brian?
And one other question, and I think you touched on it a little bit, but for a family that might not have the technology needs to to be able to do remote learning? Is there assistance available?
Yeah, absolutely, and we really want those families to kind of reach out to us, especially as they start to know who their teacher is. As we start to say, this is the teacher and this is the class list for that, and that's happening very quickly, as they start to connect to that teacher to let us know if I don't have a device that my child can use, or I need a hotspot, for example, that we just don't have internet connectivity at all at our home. In the spring, we know that we did loan quite a few devices out, and but we know that then it was a lot of families were sharing. Maybe one child was sharing with 3 other siblings or with mom and dad, and so now they're saying, now that we're fully remote, we're going to need a device, and that's okay, and we're going to make sure that we do our very best to get that into the hands of families.
Good. Yeah, there's just one that says, Julie says, I literally just received a call from the school relaying some information, so.
That's great to hear.
Yeah,
That's great to hear.
the school districts are trying to get that information out
They
in
are.
a short time. Your summer hasn't been the typical summer, any of your staff members, they've been planning,
Right.
so everybody just have patience with the school districts, and we'll get through this. We
I
really
agree.
appreciate you coming in.
I appreciate it. And it is hard to hear some of the negative comments. If they're constructive, then that's one thing, and we can take those. Somebody said to me, as superintendents, you must have to have very thick skin. And we do, but we still have very soft hearts. We have thick skin. We try to have a sound mind always. But it is still, and our educators too. I think that's we as superintendents are kind of, and board members are kind of used to having some tough conversations and hearing some tough because parents and families are stressed out, and I respect that right now. I do. I respect that they're stressed about, what do you mean we're going remote? And so while I respect that, it's hard because our educators are taking it very personally too, because they hear why don't the teachers want to come to school? They want nothing more than that, but they also are scared about safety. Sure. They're nervous about safety of students and themselves and one another. And so those types of things it is a balancing act, and I respect that a lot, and I appreciate that there are so many out there that see that this is a very challenging situation, and we all wish it could go away. If we could do that, boy, that would be the answer.
When you talk about tough skin, we've had to get tough skin around here, and we tell our viewers and that the naysayers, as I call them, they want to come on and just nitpick everything, and it's not personal.
Right.
We're all in this together, and I love everybody who follows us, and I tell them that.
I appreciate that.
I want them to understand we're all in this together, Team St. Clair.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
Superintendent, I really like the word grace. I think
Absolutely.
you're acting, I think that is a
Yes.
key part of your plan, and that's the first time we've heard that word.
Yeah.
And I think that's the way to move forward.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And it is. We're going to get past this. We're going to together, Team St. Clair, all of us are going to get together, get through this at some point. But we have to treat each other with, if possible, with grace and compassion and flexibility. So,
Yeah.
thank
And
you.
Emily, she did a great job. Thank you. Thank you. Well, Chairman, excited today. Numbers are going down a little bit. Our daily positivity rate down to 3.9, which is good. And of course, the number I always like to watch is the positivity rate over the last 3 days, 7.1. That's the one I like to see.
And the sheriff's been out checking compliance, and letters have gone out to some people that needed a little reminder what to do, and some other actions are forthcoming. But I think, all in all, people seem to be getting the message. That's why the numbers seem to be headed in the right direction, but we've got to continue. It's still too high. 7.1%
It's too
is
high.
still way over double the state average.
Exactly, and we talk about, wanting the business people. We had that nice call yesterday with the Chamber of Commerce, and we reinforced that we want our businesses to be open. We don't want to go backwards. We don't want to shut down. The governor kind of touched on that today. He said him and IDPH are monitoring. If that's the case, we'd have to look at that, but we don't want that, so let's stop that. As we say all the time, this virus is changing all of our lives daily. If there's one person on there that can honestly say it's not changed your life, then I got to disagree with you. And the reason why I say that, if your life hasn't changed, you wouldn't be following this feed every day. You wouldn't be listening to the news media, all the news outlets. So this virus has changed our lives daily. The only thing I can tell you is there's 155 people in this county that aren't worried about it anymore, and that's because they're not with us anymore. And that's because of COVID. And I don't want to hear about they didn't die from it. The medical experts have said it. The county records show that, the coroner's office. So 155 of our county residents aren't consumed with this. But we are, and we don't want to add to that list. So do what we ask you to do. Wear your mask, wash your hands, watch your social distancing, and as we tell you every day, we will get through this as a team with grace, just as Carrie said. We'll be back shortly with Cindy and Daisy to translate this into our Spanish communities, and we'll be back here tomorrow afternoon at 3:30 for the next briefing. Thank you.